Hello and welcome to tonight's On the Sofa. We're very privileged to have Bobby Barnes on with us tonight, and we will be catching up with him shortly. Just a couple of things. We just want to send our condolences from the OSC to Mark Kennedy, who his father passed away late last week. And understandably, the Meet the Manager event at the County Ground on Thursday has been postponed. So if you did have tickets for that, the club will be in touch with you regarding a new date with that. And also, we'd like to send our thoughts to the people of Southport on the major incident they've had today at the daycare where there's been some stabbings for the children. I'm not sure of what the condition of them are, but yeah, it's been an awful day for the people of Southport, so we send our thoughts to them. And on better news, we've got a couple of golds, well, a gold in the Team GB, and they're both Wiltshire people. So the team eventing, so Tom McEwen and Laura Collett, who are both from Wiltshire. So we send our best wishes to them and congratulations. So that's a gold for team eventing. So let's bring Vic on. I think he's got some SAS news.
I do, Chris. Good evening to you. And just to balance it out, as I'm in Devon, I better say congratulations to Tom Daly, hadn't I, who get a silver today. Tom from Plymouth, of course. So it's his 5th Olympic Games, and he's got another medal. So he's got the set now, gold, silver, and bronze. So congratulations to Tom. A pretty good career.
He still looks about 16. So
he does, yeah. A pretty good career so far, I think it's fair to say. Yes, SAS travel. Chesterfield, they're sold out for that. So no more seats available for the buses for the trip to Chesterfield on the opening day of the season on the 9th of August, the Friday night. But there are seats available for Crawley and Crewe. Now, phone bookings are being taken on Monday and Wednesday evenings from 6 till 8, and we'll put the number up in a minute so that you can see the numbers to ring. Monday and Wednesday evenings, and also at the club shop during opening hours. So that's how you can get in touch with SAS Travel. There you are. Telephone number and email at the bottom of the screen. And also during the week, you can go into the club shop and book things as well. So we'll also be talking to SAS Travel next Monday about their plans for the season, following, of course, the sad loss of Mark Waters during the summer, who ran it so superbly. So it carries on as Mark would want it to do. And we will be talking about that next Monday.
Thank you, Vic. So let's bring Bobby on. There we go. Hiya.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Right. Any comments? Any questions, leave in the comments and we'll get through as many as we can. And I will see you later.
Thanks, Chris, very much indeed. Bobby Barnes, it's great to welcome you. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us this evening. We send our best wishes to your wife for a quick recovery from surgery as well. So we wish you all the very best for that. The first question I have to ask you, Bobby, is David Oswald Barnes. How does that become Bobby? Because this is really the most important question of the whole night. How does that work?
It's funny, actually, but it's been particularly relevant now because obviously it's what's on my passport and it's what I was actually christened as a youngster. But basically, when I was born, my elder sister was reading a book called Baby Bob and insisted that I be called Bob. That stuck and stayed with me all through my playing career, and obviously up to now. I think most people are very surprised when they do see the David Oswald. None more so than my wife when we actually got married, when she suddenly realised she was marrying David Oswald, which was a bit of a shock to her as well. But no, officially David Oswald, but Bobby, no, AKA as they say, also known as.
What an amazing story. You see, that's often the way of it, that, you know, things like that stick with you, because throughout your career, I've only ever known you as Bobby Barnes. Isn't that unbelievable, isn't it, really? And your wife, was she put off when she found out it was David Oswald? Is she all right with it?
I don't think she was thrilled with the Oswald, but I think David was fairly mainstream, so I think she was okay with that.
Excellent. Well, that's cleared that up. That's the most important issue. You can go. Thanks very much for your time. Now, let's start about your career then. Obviously at West Ham, your boyhood club, and FA Youth Cup medal, 1981, England Youth Caps. How did you get involved with West Ham?
Started as a youngster, playing for, as a lot of youngsters, the pathway that in those days was, your local authority teams, county teams, and on to obviously national teams as well. I started with West Ham probably at the age of about 11 or 12. Signed as a schoolboy at 14. 16 as a scholar as is now, but was an apprentice in those days, and then at 17 as a professional, and very privileged to spend the time that I did at which was very much my boyhood club, and I have very fond memories of my time there, growing up there as well.
What sort of era was this? I mean, obviously people know West Ham from the '66 World Cup, all that kind of thing, but what sort of era were you growing up there, as it were?
Well, as a youngster before turning pro, it was very much, I mean, in those days, West Ham were very much a club that would be bouncing between, I suppose, what the Championship would be now and what would now obviously be the Premier League. And I was fortunate enough, really, that the year we won the FA Cup in 1980 as a second division or Championship team at that particular time, and it was in the following season that I made my debut for West Ham as a 17-year-old. And funnily enough, most people, particularly West Ham fans, always point to my debut where I scored against Watford, where we won 3-2. But in actual fact, probably a lot of people don't realise that I did in fact make my debut for West Ham on the Tuesday night before that, actually, in the Bernabeu Stadium, in the old Cup Winners' Cup. So in actual fact, my real debut for West Ham was actually in the Bernabeu. So that was my first professional game, really, and I suppose it'd be very hard to live up to those lofty heights really from there. But yeah, it was a great start to my career, and sadly didn't perhaps stay at those lofty levels. But no, I was very proud of the career that I did have, and the clubs that I played for, and the fact that I was able to have a career, a very long-lasting career post playing, which took me to work for most of the governing bodies. I worked with the Professional Footballers Association here in England. I worked with the Premier League, the FA. I worked with FIFA and UEFA. And I was president of FIFA Pro Division Europe, which is the global edition, if you like, of the Players' Union here in the UK.
Yeah, we'll get to that later if you don't mind. But I mean, hang on a minute. You're walking out of the Bernabeu Stadium. Now, this is one of the most famous football stadiums in the world, not in Spain, in the world. What were your thoughts of it when you came out?
Well, I'm a 17-year-old who was up to that been playing in youth team games and reserve team games with very small crowds, and then all of a sudden you're playing in one of the biggest European competitions, as was at the time, in, as you say, probably one of the most iconic stadiums in the world. So yeah, it was a little bit surreal, really, but I must have done reasonably. I can't remember too much about that particular game, but I must have done reasonably well because I kept my place and played on the Saturday. When obviously I made my league debut, if you like, and scored on that occasion. So yeah, that was a very nice memory.
Yeah, scoring for your boyhood club. Take us through the emotions of that, because most of us want to play for our team. Most of us don't ever get that chance or aren't good enough. But you score for your boyhood team. How's that feel?
Well, I think again, it's something really that is a bit surreal. It's something that you've been working towards, if you like. As a youngster, your dream is to sort of play for your local team, and then having got the opportunity to join the club and work through the ranks. The next ambition, obviously, is to get yourself into the first team, and to do that, and to make your mark, and to score, and to win games for the fans who you've grown up with as much as anything else, because coming from where I did, pretty much everyone was a West Ham fan within the area. So it was very much a case of me, sharing that dream, if you like, with many people I'd grown up with.
Yeah, Upton Park, of course, not anywhere like the palatial surroundings they have now, is it? I mean, often people point to the tight confines of Upton Park, the Boleyn ground. Did that suit you?
I think it was for us. It certainly was an advantage in the sense that yeah, I mean, I know that history plays tricks, but I don't think of many games that we actually lost under the floodlights at home. So if we'd have played all our midweek games, we'd have probably been more successful. But no, it certainly was an advantage. It was very tight, very intimidating, and certainly friends of mine who came as opposition players playing at West Ham used to describe the fact that they were so close that the crowd could practically lean forward and grab them. So it was very intimidating, and I think it certainly helped. That was when things were going well, but equally, when things weren't going so well, it was a bit of a double-edged sword, really. That you could hear every comment.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, you had people close to the ground, didn't you? So, they were there, as it were. So it's going well for the Irons, but then you go to the Iron, don't you, of Scunthorpe, and on loan. You've made 43 league appearances for West Ham, scored 6 goals. So how did the move to what would have been the old showground in those days? How did that come about?
Yeah, it was a bit of a culture shock, really. I think in those days, I think it was very much a case that you had the mindset, I want to play football and I don't want to be playing reserve team football. And at that particular time, I wasn't making a breakthrough into the team and playing games in the first team that I would have hoped to. And I was happy to go and take an opportunity to go and play somewhere else. I mean, to be honest, I've never been to Scunthorpe before. I've never heard of it, but to be honest, but I went down there and it was an experience. I played with some experienced people there at the time. There was Mark Atkins, who went on to win a Premier League medal with Blackburn. There was John Hawley, the big centre forward who played for Arsenal and Leeds. And it was really a case of, going and playing men's football, if you like, on the basis of, it mattered rather than youth team and, reserve team football, which wasn't really to my taste. I was far happier playing a competitive match at whatever level.
Got one from mine here. He says, really tricky winger, fans' favourite, running down the Shrivey wing, very skillful, great signing from Aldershot. You see, people like you at Swindon. We'll get onto that in a minute. So then you made some league appearances for Scunthorpe, no goals there, but you moved to Aldershot. So how did that come about?
Again, it was a case really that I wanted to be playing football, and at that particular time, Aldershot, close to London, appealed to me. Some very experienced players there. Again, people like Andy King, who the sadly late lamented Andy King, who obviously you'll know from his time there at Swindon as well, Andy. So Andy was a teammate of mine, lovely man, and along with people like Tommy Langley, the ex-Chelsea striker, for example. And really, again, it was just a case of I was very keen to relaunch my career, and I felt if I was to go to a small club like that, score a few goals, then perhaps that would help me back on the trail back upwards, if you like. And that worked out really in the sense that I went to Aldershot, scored a lot of goals there, and then Lou Macari came along and bought me and took me to Swindon.
Yeah, let's not gloss over Aldershot, because you were quite successful, weren't you? I mean, I remember you beating Wolves in the playoff semi-finals. I think B, or is it D.O. Barnes, scored a couple of goals in those playoffs, didn't you?
Well, that's right. In actual fact, we actually won the playoffs and got relegated. And got promoted. We actually beat Wolves in the playoff final. Actually, and I was fortunate enough to score, as you said, in both legs. And obviously, at that time, Wolves were a massive team and the very strong favourites. They had Steve Ball playing for them, who went on obviously to play for England. Steve, and obviously a prolific goal scorer. And we really upset the apple cart there. And one of the interesting facts that I subsequently learned later from that, which is in all the history of the playoffs that there have been, the Football League playoffs, apparently I scored the first goal that was ever scored in a playoff game. And the reason for that being is that it was a playoff semi-final, and because it was on the Friday before any games were played on the Saturday, it was in the first year of the playoffs. So I got in 24 hours early, actually, and so because our game kicked off earlier, but scored a goal on that Friday evening, and that I was told was the first goal ever scored in the playoffs.
Amazing, brilliant stuff. I mean, Aldershot, of course, the wreck many of us away fans will remember the little troll through the old to the allotment to get to the away end. But again, like Upton Park, tight confined ground, isn't it? Or yeah, isn't it? Yeah, it's still going, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to see that they've been reborn again, actually, because I know they had a very tough time in the 90s, and I think they went out of business and came back in, I believe, as Aldershot Town. I think they're back now in the conference, so or the National League, I should say, and I'm very, very pleased to see that there is still a club going in that area.
Yeah, we won't talk about the first round of the FA Cup last season when they won 7-4 at Swindon after being 7-0 up at one point. That came to my head as soon as I was saying it and thinking, maybe we'll not mention Aldershot too much. But no, you had a great time there. And so therefore, in comes Lou Macari, £50,000. Steve Berry, who'd been at Swindon briefly, moves in the opposite direction. So when Lou comes in, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was very excited to come to Swindon because obviously at that particular time, I wanted to get myself back up the ladder as much as I could. Swindon at the time were in the equivalent of the Championship. Now it was the old second division. Along with that, there were some very good teams in that division at the time. You had people like Manchester City and Leeds United and Newcastle. So there were some really good games ahead, and certainly Lou had been on a tremendous run in terms of bringing the team from the old fourth division right up to the second division, and obviously others followed on and took the club into what was then the old first division. So I think you shouldn't underestimate, and I'm sure people don't, the role that Lou Macari played in the history of this club, really, and the way that he developed a team and a style and a system that worked, and evolved that by bringing in different players at different times when he felt that something else was needed. Because I think when Lou signed me at the time, I think it was fair to say that the style that had been successful in getting the team into the Championship, which was a very direct style, perhaps needed a bit of refinement in order for us to be competitive in the Championship. And I think he got that spot on, really. And we certainly had some excellent players at that at that particular time. People like Colin Calderwood, who obviously went on to captain Scotland. Fraser Digby, of course, the goalkeeper. Phil King went on to Aston Villa. You had obviously Jimmy Quinn, who like myself, sort of also had spells at West Ham as well. Jimmy, Steve White. So it was I think it was a very good team I came into, and I think it was really a lot of hard work. I mean, it was a very hard-working team. Certainly, Lou was very much one for the work ethic. I think our training sessions were legendary, particularly with that running track, which I don't know if it's still there, but there was the running track to the side of the ground, and I think a lot of us, if we'd had our way, I think we'd have taken our tools and torn it up ourselves with some of the Monday and Tuesday mornings we spent there.
Very nice running track, actually. I run around it a lot myself. Now, you mentioned the move to Swindon, so I'm going to reel off some facts and figures, which you're no doubt aware. Manchester City home, lost 4-3. Barnes, Bamber, Foley. Leicester City lost 3-2. Barnes, Quinn. Now, I'm going to come back to that Leicester game in a minute because there's a very special reason for doing that, and I think you might well know. Plymouth Argyle at home, 1-1, Barnes. Leeds United home, lost 4-2, Barnes 2. Bournemouth home, won 4-2, Barnes, White 2 and Quinn. Huddersfield home, won 4-1, Barnes, Quinn, Foley 2. 6 successive games in which you scored. Now, that's making quite an impression, isn't it?
Well, it was actually 7 goals in 6 games as well, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's something I'm very proud of, and it was. I think it always helps when you come to a new club and hit the ground running, and I think on that occasion, I think certainly it was for me. It was what I'd really come there to do. I really wanted to make an impression. I would have to say that Lou was very good in that sort of. Although I was actually a winger. Lou gave me a lot of freedom to actually come off the wing and play, and there aren't too many wingers, I'd say, with that sort of record, but I think it would be fair to say that was helped by a lot of the fact that we had really good strikers at the time, people like Quinn and Bamber and Steve White, for example, and I benefited an awful lot from knockdowns and sort of assists from those guys as well.
Yeah, well, scoring in 6 successive games at any level is fabulous. So, second division level, fantastic. Darren says, Bobby, what a player. October 87, locked horns in the league with Man City at home, lost 4-3, but a great game. Bobby scored. Bobby always put in a shift. Real crowd pleaser. I was gutted when he left. See, people did like you. I keep saying that. Now, I'm going to mention that Leicester game for a very special reason, because you might well remember this. We were 2-0 up. Steve Foley was sent off. Kelvin Morton was the referee.
Yep.
Eventual score 3-2 to Leicester City. Now, what's odd about that? Well, the following season, October the 26th, 1988, Leicester City 3, Swindon Town 3 up at half-time. Steve Foley, Tom Jones sent off, 3 apiece. Jimmy Quinn was playing for Leicester. 2 successive years. What do you remember about those 2 bonkers matches?
Well, what I remember the first game in particular at the old Filbert Street as was. I remember at that particular time thinking we're in real trouble here. Kelvin, I've seen quite a bit on the circuit and sort of had different discussions with him about some of the decisions. But probably that game, what struck me more than anything else was that there was a particular midfield player who stood out for Leicester above everybody else, really, and that was Gary McAllister.
Yes.
And he was an outstanding player, Gary, and even that was the first time I played against him, and I remember thinking at the time, this guy will go on to bigger and better things, and obviously he did that. The game back at the county ground, the 3-3, I remember in particular because I remember at the time that I hadn't been playing particularly well, and I remember scoring in that game, and I remember being first to the ball to score against one of my old rivals and competitors, big centre back Steve Walsh for Leicester. But certainly, we always seem to have good games against Leicester, and obviously with Quinny sort of on the other side as well, sort of was obviously because it'd been very much one of the architects of any success we'd had at Swindon over the years, and he was a big miss for Swindon, a real loss when he went, because not just his goal scoring, but also the way he led the line.
Eventually to return, of course, as manager, but the same referee, the same set of circumstances. Lightning does strike twice, it seems to me, in that occasion. How were you doing at Swindon? We're going to get onto an unfortunate incident a little later. I'm sure you know what I mean about that. Lee says, one of my favourites growing up watching the Town. You're looking well, Bobby, says Lee. So there you go. So how are things going? Because you say scored in 6 successive games. You're a crowd favourite. There's no question about that. How are you feeling?
At that particular time, things were going really well. But I don't think it's any secret to say that Lou and I had a bit of a fallout. And that sort of, took credit to him. Although he sort of, we did have a fallout, he still kept picking me. But it'd probably be fair to say that I didn't play as well as I could have been playing in the latter part of my time there. And I think that really, the writing was on the wall a little bit. And I know we'll touch on the West Brom game, because it's something obviously I've got very strong opinions about. But I think really that West Brom game was the beginning of the end, really, because I think at that stage, I think, without being critical of Lou, I think I was out of the team through suspension, and I suppose it was easier not to bring me back, and I think that's what happened at that particular time. But I would stress that certainly I've got every respect for Lou. We had a fallout, but we're grown ups. We met in subsequent years, and we still get on very well. And I think it's fair to say that Lou's doing a tremendous job now with the homeless around Crewe. And I think he deserves a big pat on the back for that, really. The way that he has bounced back from some of the adversity he's had in his life as well. So if you're around, Lou, I hope you're well.
And there was that wonderful program called Marvelous. I don't know if you've ever seen it, when he was at Stoke. It's well worth looking out. Absolutely magnificent. So have a watch of that if you haven't had a chance to see it. This is from Knighton. Bobby Dazzler, tricky as they come, he says. So there you go. Right. Should we get on to West Brom, men? The reason I remember it is because I was a reporter at the time, and you very graciously came out and spoke after that game about what had happened. So Let's go back to January. Let's go back to January the 1st, 1988. It's in the 50-something minute. Tell us what happened. John Martin is the referee, I think it's fair to say.
Not a great start, actually. It was actually Ray Lewis, I believe.
Oh, was it? Oh, and the program says John Martin, but I'll take your point. Yeah, take your word.
No, I know it was Ray, and I'll tell you for why as well, because every time I see Ray, and I see him quite a bit, we still discuss this sending off, because basically at that particular time, we were playing West Brom. I remember Ron was manager, Ron Atkinson was manager, and they had a young Carlton Fairweather, not Fairweather, I beg your pardon. You'll know who I mean. Went on to play for Leeds United. Very good midfield player. I'll just call him Carlton.
Paul Furlong.
Played for. No, not Carlton Cole. No,
Carlton Palmer.
Palmer. Beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Carlton Palmer was making his way there as well, very successfully. And in that particular game, I was getting quite a bit of rough treatment. And in, as you said, that 57th minute or whatever, I was chopped down, if you like, again, got up, turned round to Ray and put two fingers up like that and basically said to him, "That's twice now and you've done nothing about it." Ray took that as the old insulting V signal and sent me off. And as I said, I mean, I see Ray quite a lot, actually. And as I said, we talk about it every time, and he asks me if I've forgiven him yet. And I have forgiven Ray now, but I would honestly say that it was a very pivotal moment in my career at Swindon, in the sense that I think it really took me out of the team, and really I struggled to get back in after that. And so I think that I've subsequently went on to Bournemouth after that. But it was a shame, because I very much enjoyed my time at Swindon, and I was quite saddened to leave in the way that I did.
What sort of effect did it have on you? Because I know after the game you were rightly furious about it. I mean, how long did that last? Did you ever sort of think about it and calm down about it? Or, as you said, it had a pivotal it was a pivotal moment in your time at Swindon.
Well, so, Ray will tell you it's probably 30 years on and I'm still going on about it. So I think it was more the sense of injustice as much as anything else, because if you do something wrong, you hold your hands up and you take your punishment. But on that particular occasion, it was absolutely, out of my hands. I did nothing wrong. And in fact, if anything, I felt more the injured party, in the sense that, I've been on the end of quite a few rough challenges. And in actual fact, I'm the one who ends up going off for something that was really a misunderstanding as much as anything else. And I think in this day and age, I mean, nowadays you can actually challenge these decisions. And certainly, never mind about VAR, which is a different debate, if you like, but certainly had that been challenged, and with the footage that would have been available, I mean, I've actually still got a picture, believe it or not, of myself, which I don't know which photographer took it, with myself actually showing that signal there, and I've actually got that photograph as well.
It was amazing, and to have such a pivotal sort of effect on somebody's career, because you were, as I said, you were a fan's favourite. I got another one here, so some from Knight says, "Don't see wingers like him these days." I mean, as a winger, you would have been kicked a fair few times, not only in that game, but right throughout your career, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, and I think that goes with the territory. And to be honest, it works both ways, in the sense that certainly I got my fair share of free kicks and penalties as well. So I think there was an advantage to that as well. But you go into tackles. As a winger, you're not renowned for exactly being tough tackling, sort of. So as much as anything, you're trying to be as evasive as you can, really. So if you do get caught, it usually hurts, in the sense that sort of it's one that you haven't been able to get out of the way of.
I mean, if you look at Jack Grealish these days, he goes through a similar thing, doesn't he? I think he's the most foul player in the Premier League. Is that right? Something like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, you look at Jack, and obviously, he commits people, and I think people who commit people, they draw challenges, and the more challenges you draw, I suppose there are going to be more fouls. And you look at someone with the ability of Jack as well, who he's a magician on the ball, isn't he? He can go either way, and I mean, you can imagine that a lot of the challenges that he faces are are really just mistimed and clumsy rather than actually intentional or vindictive.
Let's have a look. What was it like playing with Chris Kamara, and did you still have contact with him?
I still see Chris around on the circuit. We lived close to each other when I lived in Swindon, and to be fair to Chris, when I first came, he very much took me under his wing and looked after me. I've got a lot of time for Chris, and he's gone on and had a fantastic career post playing as well, and he should be very proud of that. I'm sure he is. But lovely family, lovely man, Chris. Got a lot of time for him, and he was a very good, very underrated player as well, because he was very much the enforcer of our team. Really, because he had that bit of steel really, where he sat in front of our back four, and thou shall not pass, if you like. A ball and a player rarely went past Chris together. One or the other.
I wonder what happened to him. He hasn't done much since retiring. No, I mean, he did well as a manager, of course, at Bradford City. Got him up by the playoffs, didn't he? So he's done a lot, really. So there you go.
And I think his post-playing career as well, on the media side as well, and the punditry and everything. I believe he released a record as well, Chris. So,
he has,
he's certainly been a busy boy.
Yeah, he's done all right. So when did you sort of realise that your time at Swindon was perhaps coming to a close? How did that come about?
Probably when Harry Redknapp rang me and said that Lou said, "Did I want to sign him? Did he want to sign me?"
This was at Bournemouth, of course.
Yeah. So I went. I had the opportunity to go. I mean, I'd had opportunities to go to Bournemouth in the past, and I always had a really good relationship with Harry. And so when that opportunity came, I realised that I think the winds of change were blowing. I think new players had come in, and I think that I felt that my chances of playing regularly would be limited. And I'm not someone who wanted to sit on a bench or sit in a stand. I wanted to play football, and I went to Bournemouth, and I believe I was their record signing at that particular time. I think I paid about 120,000 or something at the time. And again, I thought that I've got a good relationship with Harry. It will work out, but sadly, didn't really work out the way I would have hoped at Bournemouth, and I was on the move again fairly quickly after that.
I was going to say, 14 games I've got written down here, 110 grand you went to Bournemouth for. Harry Redknapp, of course, West Ham legend, so there was a tie-up there, wasn't there? And then to Northampton for 70,000. And you had a decent old time at Northampton. Tony Adcock, your striking partner, did well there.
Yes, it was unfortunate, really, because the club got into really severe financial difficulty, which was very common at that particular time, and it really reached a stage really where they couldn't afford to keep myself and Adcock, really, although we both scored a lot of goals there, and but it really came to pass really that the club couldn't afford to keep the two of us. They were in severe financial difficulty. They needed to raise funds, and they had to sell the pair of us on the cheap, really, probably to their biggest rivals, which must have really stuck in their throats.
Yeah, Peterborough United just up the road. Now, what did you take from that when a club was in financial trouble that you were at, when you later worked with the PFA and in your later work? Because footballers are the same as everybody else. They have contracts, they have families, all that kind of thing. Insecurity comes into it. So what did you take out of that?
Well, I think a lot of people tend to look at football and they see it really at the top end, and they see the flash cars and the big salaries at the Premier League level. But what they don't realise is that, as you just touched on there, Vic, there is a lot of insecurity as you go down the pyramid, and players do not have that job security. They might have a 1-year contract, or like an 18-month contract, or so the 4 or 5 year contracts are more or less unheard of once you get beyond the Championship, really. And for the majority of lads who are playing League One and League Two, they will certainly be earning decent money, but they're certainly not going to be earning the sort of money that's going to set them up in the way that a Premier League player would for their life after football. And it's a very, very short career. I mean, during the time I was working with the PFA, one of the questions that we always used to ask groups of people was, how long was the average playing career at any given time? And I'll perhaps pose that one to you, Vic. What would you say that the average playing career would be for a professional player?
Well, not including the academy, obviously. If you sort of get into the first team, 19, 20, I don't know, 32, 33, if you're lucky. I don't know.
Well, at the time, the statistic that we were dealing with was that an average playing career, if you took into account injuries, retirements, shorter careers by players who perhaps might have only been in for a year or two, the average playing career was 8 years. And so for the vast majority of young lads who came into playing professional football with a dream of having a career, even if they were fortunate enough to have that career, it might be 8 to 10 years. And during that period of time, they would have probably sacrificed any education or any vocational opportunities and really just thrown their lot in with being a professional footballer. And then when they get to 31, 32, 33, there's a huge shock because there's a whole lot of living still to do then. At that time, particularly, lads in their early 30s probably have young families, probably have mortgages, and they are then trying to find another career that's going to not only replace their income, but also psychologically replace the buzz of playing professional football and the camaraderie that there is in a dressing room. And it's why you see it's why it's such a hot topic at the moment when you talk about well-being and welfare, because there are real difficulties that players encounter in the transition when they move from being a player to going into the outside world.
Sure, of course, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on. You go to Peterborough then, and again, you're successful there, and you get promotion via the playoffs at Wembley. Because, of course, we talked about the playoff before, but that was over 2 legs, so you didn't actually play at Wembley with the playoffs before. But this is a different kettle of fish now. The playoffs have become bigger animals, as it were. Yeah. That was a decent team, wasn't it?
Yeah, indeed. I think it was a great period of time, and there were a lot of similarities, if you like, with the style of play as well, with Peterborough United under the late great Chris Turner and Lou Macari. I mean, he also advocated a very direct style and had a very similar pathway, actually, in the sense that Peterborough had also come through the divisions with a direct style, and then when they had sort of wanted to take that next step, perhaps look to refine the playing system a little bit, and that's where perhaps myself and Adcock came in. Tony and myself came in to perhaps add a little bit to that team, and we were fortunate enough in the first season that we came there, we did actually get promoted to the Championship. And one of probably the biggest achievements at that particular time for Peterborough United wasn't just getting to the Championship, it was actually staying there. Because at that particular time, you had teams like West Ham, you had Newcastle United, you had Derby County were paying huge amounts of transfer fees and salaries at that time as well. So it was a very, very competitive league, and for Peterborough to stay in there for the couple of years that they did at that particular time was a really great achievement, and with basically the same group of players.
I mean, would you sort of count them as a similar type of size club to Swindon? You see the point I'm making? Because
yes, you
can draw comparisons, can't you, between the two clubs?
I think very much so. I think if you look at the two towns or cities, as the city of Peterborough, they're very, very similar. And I like towns and cities that really have one club. I think for me, it's great to see kids walking around whether they're wearing a Swindon Town shirt or whether they're wearing a Peterborough United shirt, and very much Peterborough was very much a football club that had a huge hinterland as well of potential support, much the way as Swindon does as well. I think the nearest club, I think you've got Reading to the east, and I think you've got Bristol to the west, haven't you? Really, so you've got quite a big catchment there as well. And I certainly think that both of the clubs that we're talking about here are equipped and capable of sustaining a club at least at Championship level. And I know there have been some lean years for Swindon in recent times, but I really think that if they get a fair wind and some good results, the crowds will start coming back to the county ground. We'll get more people in there, and I think that it would be sustainable, I think, to go through the divisions and at least get to the Championship. And similarly, I know that that's always the aspiration with Peterborough. They've been a bit of a yo-yo club between League One and the Championship in recent years. But I do think there are very strong similarities between the demographics of the town and the football club.
Yeah, I was going to use that very phrase, the Yo-Yo Club, because they do seem to do that, don't they? And they do seem to appoint Darren Ferguson as manager. I think it's his 150th stint at the moment, isn't he? So,
I'll tell you what they do well as well, though. I mean, and a good friend of mine, Barry Fry. I mean, they always seem to pull out one or two players to sell for huge amounts of money as well, don't they? And I think Barry's done that very successfully for Peterborough for many years. I think it would be nice to see, perhaps someone come through, because they seem to have a very good youth system at Peterborough in terms of bringing young players through. I haven't really noticed too much in Swindon whether we've had players coming through at that level at this time.
Well, we got a very good academy side last year, got to the quarterfinals of the FA Youth Cup with one or two really, really good players. So, or even more than that, I should say. And one of them has just moved on to Middlesbrough. So, there's a lot of bright players coming through. Right, Peterborough comes to an end. Partick Thistle, and then Hong Kong, Torquay United, very, very briefly, and then Hendon, and then back to Hong Kong. So it's a sort of a bit of a strange old time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I had a very short spell in Scotland where a good friend of mine, David Hodgson, was working at the time as an agent, and he sort of said to me, "Look, you've not been to Scotland, why don't you give it a go?" And I went and spent a little time in Glasgow. I really enjoyed it. I think the fans were fantastic, but it was only ever going to be short term. And then obviously I spent periods in Hong Kong, which I enjoyed immensely, because as much as anything else, it was a different lifestyle. It was a different experience. I played in all of the divisions and Scotland in the UK, and the opportunity came to go and have a different lifestyle, to experience something different. Spent 2 years over there. My children enjoyed their time there as well. They went to school. They went to school in Hong Kong. I played football there, and it was a real life experience as much as just playing football. And I'm very glad that it's one of the things that football gives you the privilege to have, really, because I've been very fortunate, both in my playing career and post career, in that I've been to places that I could have only have dreamed that I could travel to. I've been fortunate enough to watch World Cup finals and Champions League finals and European finals all around the world, and that's been great post career. But all of that was only made possible by the playing career that I actually had. But just on the Torquay one, I will tell you the story about the Torquay one, which was basically what had happened is I'd actually retired, and I remember at the time they had a match against a touring team from Barbados. I think it was the Barbados Cavaliers or whatever. And I remember at the time the manager was a lad called Don O'Riordan, and he was trying to put a team. He was trying to put a team together, Don, and he rang me and he said, "Look, are you available? Would you play in this game for us?" And I said, "Well, to be honest, I've retired. I've finished. I'm home with boots. I'm finished." And so they said to me, "No, come down and play." So I went down and played in this game, this friendly game, and scored a couple of goals. And then next minute, the chairman, Mike Bateson, I think it was, said to me, "Look, have you thought about not retiring?" And I said, "Well, I haven't really thought about it." And so he said, "Come down and spend a few weeks down there." And it was the summer, and to be fair, Torquay's quite a nice place in the summer. So I went down and spent a few weeks down there in the summer, played a few games, but there was never really any serious consideration to playing again, within the football league, as it were. So I had my short time there, and then opportunity came to go off back to Hong Kong, so I did that.
Yeah, I got to know Mike Bateson very well because I worked down here in Devon for a long time as sports producer. Did you meet Algernon on the Puppet and the Parrot? Algernon on the Puppet. Did you meet him in Mike Bateson's office along with the Parrot? I mean,
I can't remember, to be honest, but I do remember Mike Bateson at the time, because he seemed to have a bit of a thing where he was going and dredging up former players, if you like, to come along. And I know he did that with the late Justin Fashion, who went down there as well just before me as well. So I think Mike was always on the lookout that he might pick something up that someone might have missed. But I don't think he found too much gold in myself at that stage of my career.
Fantastic character, and he always did a very good job at Torquay United. So then, after you've retired eventually, how did your move into the PFA come? Because that's where you dealt with players' contracts. And I jokingly said to you before we started this, you're sort of like the highest moving person we've ever spoken to on this in terms of the football world. I mean, how did it all start like that?
Well, basically, throughout my playing career, although sort of perhaps I kept it well hidden, I wasn't actually that silly, and I had fairly good exam results, business qualifications, and the like. And the opportunity arose that at that particular time, the PFA had a financial management company, which was actually run by my good friend Brendan Batson. And so Brendan came to me and said, "Look, you're extremely qualified to do this. Why don't you come and work with us at the PFA, and you'll be looking after players in terms of their finances and in terms of their contracts and that sort of thing." So I went along with Brendan and joined the PFA, and over a period of time, the PFA decided that whilst we had offices in London, which were commercial offices, the main headquarters of the PFA was in Manchester, and it was felt that they really needed a presence within the London area, because obviously you had the Premier League are in London, the FA are in London, you've got Parliament in London, all the people that we needed to be engaging with. And at that particular time as well, you had a bit of a southern surge, if you like, where sort of Arsenal were doing very well. Chelsea was starting to come. So whereas there'd been a bit of a northern domination up to that point, I think the footballing landscape was spreading out a little bit, and there was a bit of success in the London area as well. So we felt that it was important that players in the south of England as well had the same access to services and facilities as those in the north. So Gordon Taylor basically asked me to set up an office for the PFA in London. We started that with 3 people, and by the time I retired 22 years later as chief executive, the PFA had a staff, I think, of nearly 100, and we had something like 30 of them in the London office. So that was the first steps that I took to joining the PFA, and I became deputy chief executive to Gordon Taylor for many years during my time there. Whilst I was at the PFA, I was also working very closely with the Premier League, and I was a trustee of the Premier League Charity Board. I was on the FA Council, so I worked very closely with the FA Council, and also worked on the unsuccessful 2018 bid, where we lost out to Russia and then Qatar. So that was some of the work I was doing whilst I was at the PFA. On an international level, I became president of FIFPro Division Europe, which is FIFPro is the global equivalent of the Players Union in the UK. So representing players in 60 odd countries. So I was president there for 10 years. During the tenure at those particular places, I also was on the FIFA Strategic Council, Football Council. I was on the UEFA Professional Football Strategy Council, and the Control and Ethics and Disciplinary Boards. So I was quite busy off field, if you like, in terms of the work I was doing post career. And so I would probably say that over the years I was probably more renowned for my work post career than perhaps during my playing career.
Did that replace the buzz you had as a player? I mean, you talked about it earlier, playing in front of thousands of people, giving pleasure to them every week. Did that replace? I mean, my goodness me, you just reeled off an extraordinary amount of responsibility, and I'll ask you about how you deal with players in other countries in a minute. But could you ever replace that buzz as a player?
I think when playing, you can never replace playing. I mean, the buzz of playing. I mean, for many, I always say to young players, play as long as you can, and because once you stop, you're a long time retired. And I mean, for me, what excited me and what helped in my transition, if you like, was the fact that most footballers by nature are very competitive, and I got as much satisfaction of getting a deal done or resolving a conflict situation, for example, which I could also see as wins, if you like. So you could see, target driven things that you could actually get outcomes from. And I think that's something that helped me, because there was always a target, whether the target is to win a football match or to score a goal or to resolve a conflict where perhaps a player has a problem with his manager and potentially might be heading out of a football club, and that somebody's able to come in and perhaps calm those waters and resolve those situations. That's equally satisfying.
Yeah, I can imagine so. So how is it dealing with a player, say, I don't know, in the Czech Republic to one in England? I mean, what are the main differences, or are they primarily the same? What would you say the differences are?
Well, the thing is, I mean, within some of the countries that I was dealing with, there were problems that were specific, for example, to countries in Eastern Europe, for example, and then Western European countries, and indeed Southern European countries. One of the big problems that we tended to have was the lack of respect for contracts in a lot of countries, particularly in some of the Eastern European countries, where players would not be paid for several weeks and months, and their registrations were then being held onto at the same time. So effectively, you were having players who were hostages to their football clubs and not being paid. And a lot of our work with the governing bodies was to try and ensure that we brought enough pressure to bear on clubs and national associations in those countries to ensure that they actually respected contracts and protected the integrity of the game. Because the one thing that happens when you get players who haven't been paid for several months, you've got financial imperatives there, and then you have dangers that might come in, things like players being vulnerable to things like match fixing, for example. Because if you haven't been paid for 6 months and then someone comes along and says, well, actually I can give you this if you do that, it creates a pressure that shouldn't be there. And you also have a situation where when leagues feel, or fans feel, that leagues are being corrupted in that way, then the crowds stop coming, and that exacerbates the financial difficulties as well. So there were so many different factors that you had to work with to try and protect the livelihoods of players and of clubs, because throughout my time it was very much a case for me that it wasn't a case of I just represent players, because at the end of the day, players need clubs need leagues, and there's a synergy that everybody needs to work together. And usually a decision that's good for players would in the main be good for clubs. And if it's good for clubs, it's probably good for leagues as well, because everybody wants competitive leagues. Everybody wants strong clubs that can afford to pay their players.
Do you think sometimes now football forgets the fan? Because we've got this recent Sky deal which sees, matches kicking off at weird times all over the place. We're going to Chesterfield on the first Friday of the season. It kicks off at 8:00, and then we're going to Crewe at 12:30 on a Saturday lunchtime, leaving goodness knows what time. I mean, how would you say football sort of views fans?
It's a difficult one, because I think that it's obviously well publicised, the white paper that's going through government at the moment, and I certainly feel that the experience that we had during the COVID lockdown, I think, really emphasised to everybody how important fans were. Because when you went to grounds and watched these games in empty stadiums, the lack of atmosphere, the lack of, certainly players play better when they've got that bit of a buzz, when there's a crowd behind them, the spectacle's better. So I think that the COVID pandemic probably brought to the fore the fact how important fans are to the game. And I think that certainly there appears, from my point of view and the governing bodies that I've worked with, there was far more engagement with fans than there was prior to the pandemic, which I think is good. At the same time, it comes down to finance, and at the end of the day, the broadcasters are king, and the sort of money that the broadcasters are putting into football now, I think that they are quite rightly going to say, well, we want the maximum impact, if you like, from our investment on the games in terms of viewing figures. So yes, they're going to change games around. I personally think that it's harsh on the fans, because particularly when you've got fans who are, booking travel, for example, a long way ahead and then having that changed. And I think there should be, because there's certainly enough money in the pot, that if that does happen, I think there should be some sort of compensatory scheme to help fans out in terms of travel when these games are changed, because I think it's, fans are the lifeblood of the game, and certainly throughout my career, they sustained me through good times and bad. The fans of football clubs, and the very fact that I'm talking now to yourself, in terms of my time and listening to fans from Swindon Town, from a football club I played for 30 years ago, is a testimony to how loyal fans are. I mean, fans don't change their football team. They can't just say, well, I'm fed up with Sainsbury's, I'm going to go to Tesco's. You're in it, aren't you? And you're invested in that football club for good or bad. And I certainly feel that. I think things are changing slightly. I think that there is at least some sort of lip service being given. They're being heard, fans, but it's a difficult one, because we all want investment into the game at all levels, and with that investment, those that invest, I suppose, will feel, well, look, this is what I'm paying for, and this is what I want. I think we need to have proper holistic discussions with all of the stakeholders together when we're talking about the impact of something. I mean, I've seen some absurd kickoffs where you've had people traveling down to London for 8 o'clock kickoffs when the last train's at 10 and things like that. I mean, there's just no sense in that. But for me,
I was going to make that very point, actually. Newcastle away at Tottenham or something on a Monday night at 8 o'clock, and all the travel that involves, people having to take 2 or 3 days off work. It's not a case of just one evening, is it? You have to take time off the next day. Claire sent this question in. What are your thoughts on clubs playing league matches in places like Saudi? Now, obviously, there's a great, a discussion about the Saudi Arabian human rights issue, things like that. But what are your thoughts on it?
Well, what I would say is that I'll first of all say I went to Qatar. I was in Qatar for the World Cup, and it was a very good World Cup. I think that football has the ability to change perceptions and to shine a light on regimes. I think in terms of the integrity of competitions, I'm not sure whether playing games abroad, league games, I think will be fair to others, because someone somewhere is going to lose a game regardless of where it is. Someone's losing a home game.
Well, we see it with the NFL and the NBA, don't we? With they play matches in London, don't they? So presumably it's the same sort of principle, isn't it?
It is, and I think that at some stage in the future, I mean, we've already seen it in some countries. I mean, where in Spain, for example, they play their Super Cup competition there. I think they do it in France as well, where they have competitive matches being played, whether in Qatar or in Saudi. So I think it's something that is not going to go away. I think that argument is always going to be being made. The human rights aspect of it is something that comes up, unfortunately, every time when there's a World Cup. Whereas I think that there should be a very clear criteria in terms of what is required of a host nation, whether that be anti-discrimination, whether that be equalities, freedom of speech. I think if you started with a piece of paper that this was where you started with, then I think you might, not encounter the problems that we do encounter now. But equally, people would say, some would certainly argue that they're, taking a global event to another country can have some sort of positive influence in terms of shining a light.
Sure. Another question: what was your favourite memory from playing for Swindon? Scoring six successive games, I would imagine. That's pretty high up there, isn't it?
I think, to be honest, that particular, it was playing against the big teams again. I'd come from a relatively small club, and to be playing against the Leeds Uniteds, the Manchester Cities, the Leicester Cities, that was fantastic for me. And also, there was always a very unique atmosphere at the county ground as well. There was, when things were going well, it was a fantastic support that we had there, And I'd like to see future generations of players experience that and that sort of success, because if you think, I mean, after I went, I mean, people like Ozzy and Glenn and John took it another level, of course, and made it to the top league, didn't they? And so, if you're a Swindon fan of a certain age, you can remember sort of these days. Whereas if you're a Swindon fan who's perhaps 20 and below, you've probably been starved of a little bit of success over the years.
Sure, we've got the Di Canio era, of course, briefly, but I can remember 1969 beating Arsenal, so that was pretty good. This is from Malcolm. Hi, Bobby. I was a ball boy the year you scored 7 in 6, and it was brilliant to watch you up close. I too was gutted to see you go. Great player and a great career on and off the pitch. Very interesting listening to you tonight. Thank you. This is from Anthony. What's your thoughts on FIFA trying to squeeze every drop of money possible from supporters at the next World Cup, being held in 33 countries with 48 nations involved? How unwieldy is that?
Well, can I just make a point of that? And I perhaps have got a bit. I must declare an interest in that. Obviously, having worked with both FIFA and UEFA, I've probably been on the inside of some of these discussions. If you look back to the last Euros, we had 32 teams, which was an increase. What I would say is that, okay, we could all talk about England performances. By the way, I think Gareth did an unbelievable job, taking the team to the final, despite all the criticism that he faced. But what I would say is that the standard of football with some of the smaller countries had increased exponentially because of the fact that they were being exposed to playing competition football. If you look, there were no easy fixtures in the, whereas in the past you saw in expanded World Cups, you saw 6-7-0 games. There were none of those. They were very competitive games. And though, bearing in mind that a lot of those players of those 32 teams in the Euros, a lot of those players, even playing for the smaller countries, are probably playing in some of the bigger leagues. They're playing in Germany, or they're playing in England, or in France, or in Spain. So I'm very much in favour of giving players an opportunity to represent their country and play on the big stage. I think that in terms of the World Cup to come, I mean, obviously it's going to be over 3 countries. There's going to be quite a lot of travelling between the USA, Canada, and Mexico. But I think when you consider that FIFA represents 210 confederations who have national football teams, even with the 48, that's still we're close to 1 in 5 of the associations can actually make it to play at the top table. And for me, I don't, when you look at the way that you work out the competition, the winning team will still play approximately the same amount of games, but it does give players from smaller countries to get an opportunity to get that exposure, and also to share that income as much as anything else as well globally. And so I'm not critical of a 48-team World Cup, because I feel that ultimately the cream will rise to the top, but you're giving other countries an opportunity to showcase, and it may well be that players at some of those smaller countries then get an opportunity to perhaps get transferred to a bigger club in one of the bigger countries.
Okay, having groups, a subsequent question just come in. Having groups of 4 and 3 going through, lots of dead rubbers will be happening at the next World Cup. Well, we'll see. I think it's fair to say, isn't it? I mean, it's a fascinating few 3 countries to hold it. I mean, Mexico, of course, have held 2 World Cups, I think, up till now. The United States held 1994, if I remember rightly. None so far in Canada, so let's see how they go. So we'll see. Can I just make a point, by the way? Yeah, go on.
Can I just make a point, by the way, in terms of the dead rubbers? It's a valid point, but what I would say is that there was a similar system operating with the best third teams, and there weren't too many dead rubbers in the Euros. Okay,
fair enough. Fair point. Bobby, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, there are so many issues in football that we could talk about all night. Primarily, it was to talk about Swindon, but my goodness me, we've gone down lots of roads which have been fascinating. And maybe one day we can have you on talking about football generally. That would be fabulous, and get your views in this, how it's going in the season, etc.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to do that, Vic. I mean, for me, it's a great privilege, the fact that I'm being asked to come back to one of my old football clubs, because, as I said, Swindon Town is a club that I hold very dear, sort of in my memories. I very much hope that they have a good season ahead of them. I know they've got a new manager. I hope you've mentioned they've got some young players coming through. Let's hope that this is the year that Swindon start that climb again, because we saw in the Lumakari era it can be done. And I think if there is that sort of impetus, I've no doubt that the town will get behind the club and provide that support that would get the club to where I believe it should be, which is at least in the Championship.
Fabulous. And that shirt behind me, of course, will be forever with a B Barnes on it or a D.O. Barnes on it. So there we are. Fabulous. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bobby. That was really interesting. And I can't believe that you had said about the careers of footballers, 10 years. It's just nothing, is it? It makes you think. It really does make you think.
Well, it does. And to be honest as well, Chris, the problem with that as well is that footballers, it's not something that they can sort of, in the main, it's not something that they can be building up for something else while they're playing, because they've got to give heart and soul really to being a player. And particularly when we talk about at the lower level where, you don't have that security of tenure. You might be on a short contract. You've got to give everything and devote all of your efforts to making sure you've got the next contract. So, when you do get to, which for most people is sort of early to mid 30s, when life changes, you've really got a challenge ahead at a time probably when you are probably least equipped to do so. When you've probably got young children, as I said before, you've probably got a mortgage, you've probably got a whole new career to try and embark upon.
It's interesting though, because you touched on it earlier, where you had taken steps to learn about business and all that kind of thing. We've had one or two players like Paul Grillcrest we had last week. He was another one who, in his career sort of learned about other things. Steve Abley, a predecessor of yours at Swindon, he too learned about business. So, I guess if you take steps...
Yes. So can I just give a little bit of a shout out to the PFA, because the PFA have an education department and vocational department whereby they have a group of people who go to football clubs and try and put steps in place so that people can get vocational courses and training to try and prepare themselves for the career afterwards, and not just players in their 20s and 30s, but probably the hidden majority that people forget about as well is the youngsters who come into the game at 16 and who are out of the game by the time they're 21. And there's a staggering attrition rate there, for example, because between the ages of 16 to 21, something like 90% of kids fall out of the game and never play professional football again.
I think there's been a lot of work on that, though, hasn't there? In terms of, they used to say, "Sorry, son, you've had it. You're out the door." But I think now there's a lot of work goes on with aftercare as well, which is good.
And they're very much needed, and it was very much needed and long overdue, to be honest, because it was something that certainly in my time at the PFA, it was a huge priority, because never mind about the fact of you're not going to be something that you've dreamed of being since you were a youngster. That hits you emotionally, psychologically, as well as the fact, well, actually, I didn't really give as much attention to my education when I was at school because of this dream. And so I've now got to find a different path to make myself employable.
Sure.
Yeah. And a lot changes from when they were at school to life now when they're not. Life has changed. The outside world has changed dramatically. So brilliant. Yeah. Thank you very much, Bobby. That's been absolutely great. And as we say, we will keep in touch and try and get you down to a game.
Thank you.
At some point. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, next week, Vic and I will be back as we are playing Chesterfield on the following Friday. We are going to do a preview of the season. So we'll have a panel on Monday to talk about what our hopes and dreams are for the season. So we will be back then. So have a good week, everybody, and we will see you then. Bye-bye.